Tracy presenta el curso Fénix sobre la psicología del conocimiento.
Session 21, Increasing Your Energy Level.
How would you like to have more energy and vitality on a day-to-day basis than you do right now? How would you like to learn some ideas and techniques that you can use starting immediately to dramatically increase the amount of vitality that you have moment to moment, hour by hour? Well, I've been studying health and energy for many years now, and in this session I'm going to give you 7 keys to having far more health, having far more vitality, and all it requires from you are the 5 Ds. Number 1 is desire. Number 2 is definition. Define clearly what you want. Number 3 is decision. Make a decision that you're going to engage in the health habits necessary to raise your energy levels. Number 4 is determination, the ability to stick at it long enough. And number 5 is discipline, the ability to discipline yourself to do what you know you should do to improve your health, whether you feel like it or not, until it becomes a new habit. Now, there's probably no place in all of this discussion where the law of correspondence is more true, in that your external body, your physical world, is a direct reflection of what is going on inside. The law of cause and effect says that the cause of the effects you experience in your life are what you put into your body, and of course what you put into your mind, and of course the law of habit. People are healthy because they develop health habits. People are unhealthy primarily because they have unhealthy habits, especially with regard to their physical behaviors and their ways of thinking. The body, the human body, is created and built to last 100 to 120 years. A good lot of research that's coming out now shows that it's possible to expand the lifespan to as much as 130 years, looking at experiments that have been done in longevity. We'll talk about these in just a second. The average life expectancy in America and Canada today is about 74.9 years. That means that 50% of the population or more die below that, some at 50, 55, 60, and so on, and half of them die over that. Your goal must be, right now, desire, definition, determination to live to be at least 80 plus. Now, once you set a goal of living to be over 80 years old, then you have to look at every single thing that you do on a day-to-day basis. What you eat and drink in the morning, mid-morning, noon, mid-afternoon, evening, and so on, what you do to your body, how you sleep, exercise, and ask yourself this question: is this moving me toward living to be 80 or more, or is it moving me away? And remember, with regard to your health, everything counts. Our body is a wonderful, wonderful machine. It generates energy. It is an energy-producing organism, and it will generate energy in abundance, and it has a natural bias toward health. Wonderfully enough, if you just stop doing some of the things that you're doing, your body will naturally move toward becoming healthier. It has a natural bias. You don't have to think about it or program or do anything special to be healthy. All you have to do is stop doing the things, what we call incorrect operation. Just the same as a machine that's built to last 100 years, but as a result of incorrect operation and improper maintenance, it breaks down long before its time. And we're going to talk in this session about some of the things that we have found. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of hours of research in leading universities have concluded that the keys to high levels of energy and vitality, and by the way, health equals energy. You can measure just how well you're doing physically at almost any time by your energy levels. And we know that, and today in America and today in Canada, everybody is concerned about low levels of energy. So here's 7 things you can do. 7 very, very simple, not easy, but simple things that you can do to dramatically increase your levels of energy, starting literally the minute you begin. Number 1, top of the list is proper weight. Proper weight is central to high levels of health and energy. Why is that? Well, there's 2 reasons. One physical, one psychological. If you are overweight, you put a tremendous tax on your heart. You put a tremendous tax on your organs. You put a tremendous tax on your muscles. If you've ever climbed up a set of stairs, you know how hard it is to climb up a set of stairs? Now think of climbing up a set of stairs with suitcases, and imagine how much overweight some people are. It's like climbing upstairs or walking around with suitcases that weigh those extra pounds. The strain on the body is imperceptible, but it's tremendous, and it tires you out. The second thing is that it is, in many cases, depressing to be overweight in a world that where everyone is thin, where thinness is on all the magazine covers and newspapers and television and movies and so on. When we see other people who are thin, when we look around us in the world and we feel that we're overweight, it causes us actually psychological depression, which is fatiguing. So how do you get to proper weight? Very simple. Visualize and affirm. Visualize and affirm. First of all, if you have a desire to get thin, make a decision, be determined, practice discipline, and then visualize and affirm your ideal weight over and over again until you reprogram your self-concept at a lower level. Remember, thin is in and stout is out. Number 2 is proper diet. Now, a lot of work has been done lately amongst Olympic athletes. A lot of work has been done in researching the diets of the people who have the most energy and vitality, and they've come up with 3 clues, 3 keys, depending upon what you eat. Number 1 is lots of variety. Is try to vary your diet so you eat a lot of different things rather than a few things, because if you eat a lot of different things, chances are you'll get all the trace vitamins and trace minerals that you require for high levels of energy, though not all, as we'll talk about in a second. Number 2 is lean source protein. Lean source protein means protein from a variety of sources like soybeans, fish, lean meats and so on, rather than fatty meats and fatty sources. Lean source protein, you need about 15% protein in your diet. So of whatever you eat on a day-to-day basis, anything more than 15% is probably in excess of your body's requirements. Number 3 is fiber-based carbohydrates. Fiber-based carbohydrates are fruits and vegetables. Fiber-based carbohydrates, you need about 75%. Fruits, vegetables, cereals, grains, and so on. 75% carbohydrates, because carbohydrates are the fuel that your body burns on a day-to-day basis. Also pasta, spaghetti, salads, and so on. If you eat 75% carbohydrates, you will very seldom gain weight. And of course, in addition to that, you need about 10% fats, but not more than 10% fats. Any more than 10% fats, 15% proteins, you tend to store it on and pack it on, and it's very, very hard to get off. And number 4 is lots of water. You need lots of water. According to the best research, about 64 ounces per day, which means about 8-ounce glasses per day. Just drink water on a regular basis. When you go to the drinking fountain, drink a glass of water rather than a slurp of water, if you like. These are the keys to proper diet. And finally, with regard to proper diet, under-eating without undernourishment. In the research that's been done at the University of California, recently they found that by experimenting with rats, that if you underfeed them so that they run lean and mean, and you don't undernourish them, what you do is you increase the amount of nutrient value in each piece of food that you eat. In other words, you eat foods that have high levels of nutrients, but you eat less of them. You keep your daily calorie intake below 2,000 calories, and you take those calories before, 80% of them before 2 p.m. in the afternoon. What will happen is that you will gradually lose weight, you'll trim down, you'll get thinner, and you'll have far more energy. And laboratory rats, they've been able to increase their lifespans by 30 to 50% simply by trimming down their diet. Their sexual potency goes up, their intelligence level goes up, their amount of energy goes up, the amount of sleep that they require goes down, all from under-eating or eating lean, eating trim. 30 to 50% increase, if it can be transferred from laboratory rats to human beings, means that if this is our current lifespan, 74.9 years, it means that it is conceivable that you and I can live to be 100, 110, 120 years old simply by changing our diets. And there's a lot of information and a lot of research on that that's really exciting right now. Another critical factor is number 3, it's proper food combining. Now this is a very controversial issue. And so what I suggest that you do, if you're interested in this subject, is read the book by Dr. Harvey and Marilyn Diamond called Fit for Life. And in there they talk about the fact that if you eat 70% of your diet is made up of fruits and vegetables, which, because 70% of your body weight is water, 70% of your diet should be water-based foods. 70% of your diet is fruits and vegetables, and then you combine foods properly in that you do not eat starches and proteins at the same time. So if you're going to eat vegetables plus protein, or vegetables plus starches, you do not eat proteins and starches simultaneously in any meal. I've tried this method of eating, and I suggest that you try it because it's astonishing. Your weight drops very rapidly, your energy levels go up very rapidly, and it happens within 24 hours. They also advise that you eat a lot of fruits for breakfast and only fruits, and you only start eating vegetables and proteins from noon onward. But you can take from it what you desire. With regard to diet, let me just say this, is that you are unique. You have a unique metabolic rate, and according to medical research, you have unique requirements for food. Some people have a physiological structure that is perfect for vegetarianism. Some have a physiological structure where they need a lot of protein. Others are somewhere in between. They need the right combination of protein and vegetarianism. What you have to do is you have to experiment yourself. Try different combinations of diets, and the indicator is how good you feel, how much energy you have, how well you sleep at night, how trim you are physically, and so on, how well your food digests and passes through. But this food combining, I have found, is quite remarkable in that it does increase your energy levels, because when you put proteins and starches into your stomach, the stomach secretes both acids and bases to digest them. The acids and bases neutralize each other. The proteins and starches do not get broken down, and they move into the digestive system as a large undigested lump, and the digestive system takes all the blood from the muscles in the brain to the digestive system to try to break down this lump. That's why you get drowsy after a big meal. That's why you get drowsy in the afternoon, is that all of your body's energy is trying to digest this food. And remember, the major source of energy drain in your body is digestion. Digestion uses more energy than anything else. So if you can decrease the amount of energy that is consumed in digestion, you can increase the amount of energy that you have available for other things. Let me go back here. There's 3 poisons that's critical to eliminate from your diet. We call them the 3 white poisons. The 3 white poisons, which are in almost every house, are sugar, white sugar, also honey, brown sugar, molasses, and so on, flour, white flour, which is an inert substance from which all food value has been removed, and salt. The average American or Canadian requires no extra sugar in their diet, but consumes 135 pounds per year. One of the major sources or causes of diabetes, which is rapidly becoming one of the major causes of premature death. White flour products have no food value in them at all, and salt, the average North American requires 2 pounds per year total in their diet of salt. The average North American consumes 20 pounds. Just decreasing the amount of salt that you take in and increasing the amount of water will wash out an enormous amount of salt, will decrease the amount of fluid that your body requires to hold the salt in suspension, and many people who stopped taking salt and started drinking water have dropped as much as 5 pounds in a matter of 3 or 4 days. So if you are overweight, if you have a lot of water retention, eliminate extra salt from your diet. Okay, number 4. Let's go back to number 4. Number 4 is eliminate, or let us say no smoking, and moderate alcohol consumption. Of all the things that you can do voluntarily to your body, smoking is the worst. In fact, according to all the medical research, there's something like 32 different diseases, all the way up to and including arteriosclerosis and lung cancer. Lung cancer is rapidly becoming the number 2 killer in the Western world today, and women are now dying at exactly the same rate as men with lung cancer. If there's anything that you could cut out of your lifestyle that would help you physically more than smoking, nobody knows what it is. 32 different diseases. So eliminate smoking. How do you eliminate smoking? You start visualizing and thinking about yourself as a non-smoker. Start affirming. I am a non-smoker. I am a non-smoker. I am a non-smoker. I am a non-smoker. And begin visualizing yourself as a non-smoker. In a certain period of time, you will lose your taste for smoking. Now, it won't be easy, but it's well worth the effort. Moderate alcohol consumption. I like the word moderate personally. But moderate alcohol consumption, according to the people who do research in this field, is about 1 drink a day. 1 drink a day, 7 drinks a week is about the most that you are allowed if you're going to be called a moderate drinker. When you start getting to 2 drinks a day or 3 drinks a day, you're starting to get into the problem drinking range. Number 5 is proper exercise. Proper exercise means aerobic. Now, aerobic exercise increases the amount of oxygen to the brain. The amount of oxygen to the brain increases the speed with which you think. It increases your level of intelligence and creativity. It also increases your energy levels. In fact, people who engage in aerobic exercise have more energy, sleep less, sleep better, have more energy for the good things in life, if you know what I mean. They eat better food, and they live longer. And they're also smarter and more creative. Now, the keys to aerobic exercise, the best aerobic exercises are cross-country skiing is the best of all, followed by swimming, followed by running, followed by cycling, followed by walking. So no matter what physical condition you're in, you can do one of the top 5, even if it's just walking. If you're going to do a vigorous aerobic exercise, what you do is you practice what is called LSD, long, slow distance. You work out 20, 30, 40 minutes a day. You can go for a walk. 2-mile walk 5 times a week will make you one of the fittest people in the world, if that's all you do is walking. If you want to run, what you need to do is you need to sustain a high level of heart rate for 20 minutes 3 times weekly. If you do that, you'll be in the top 1% of physically fit people in our society. Simple as that. Now, people sometimes say, well, I don't have time to engage in physical exercise. I don't have time to run. I don't have time to walk. I don't have time to swim. The fact of the matter is this, is that if you are physically fit, if you have higher levels of energy, then what will happen is that you will be able to work productively longer. You will be able to work productively better. You will make fewer mistakes that you have to go back and replace. You will need less sleep. You will have less downtime from physical ailments because you won't be sick. You will have more energy and vitality overall, and you will have more years to your life, more years added on to your life to do things with. The question is, how badly do you want to live a long time? Because I've spoken to many people who have made the mistake of saying, well, I'll get in shape later, or I'll change my diet later, or I'll quit smoking later, until it reaches a point where they find that they have a terminal illness or a terminal situation, and it's too late. With regard to smoking, there was a great story in the Reader's Digest a couple of years ago, talking about a fellow who wrote this article, said, you will quit smoking sooner or later. And he had been told, and he had thought about quitting smoking for 20 years, and he never did it. And one day he went to the doctor, and the doctor looked at him and took the x-rays and said, you've got lung cancer, you've got 2 months to live. And so he went home, and he put all his affairs in order, and he wrote this little story, and he sent it off to Reader's Digest. And by the time the story was published, he was already dead. There was a footnote, died of lung cancer. But it said that if you don't quit sooner, you'll quit later, but you will quit. I assure you, you will quit smoking. The best time to quit smoking is before they find that you have a lung cancer, and it's hopeless. All right. Now, the next key to health, number 6, is proper rest. According to the Alameda study, which is one of the most impressive studies ever done, it was done at the University of Southern California Department of Public Health by Dr. David Bressler. You can remember all that in a row. What they did is they took 7,000 to 8,000 men, and they followed them for 20 years, and they looked at their health habits. And they found that their health habits, the 7 key health habits, which we talked about most of them, that led to longevity, that predicted that one would live a longer life, one of them was 7 to 8 hours sleep per night. 7 to 8 hours sleep per night. Now, with regard to sleep, sometimes people say, well, how much sleep should a person have? Again, each person's metabolic rate is different. Some people need 8, 9, 10 hours sleep because their metabolic rate is slower. Some people have a higher metabolic rate. They can get along with 5 and 6 hours sleep. Sometimes when you're working hard or you're under a lot of physical stress, you need more sleep. Sometimes when you're really excited or positive or enthusiastic about something, you need less sleep. So listen to yourself. Listen to your intuition. However, we do know this, that the amount that you sleep is a habit, that your body actually becomes conditioned to sleeping a certain number of hours per night, and that it is possible for you to reduce the number of hours you sleep by affirming, visualizing, and goal planning, or programming your subconscious to reduce your sleep. Now, what they recommend in the book, Sleep Less, Live More, is that you reduce the amount of sleep by 15 minutes per day. Now, what that means is that you take, for instance, a period of your time that's relatively stable, that you're not traveling or moving around, and if you're let's say you're sleeping 8 hours and you want to get down into about the 6.5 hour range, which is very possible according to all the research, then what you say is for the first week you're going to sleep 7 hours and 45 minutes. And you just sleep 7 hours and 45 minutes until you feel comfortable at 7 hours and 45 minutes. Then you sleep 7.5 for a week, maybe even 2 weeks. And the older you are, the longer you should give yourself to develop a new habit. And over a process of about 6 weeks, you can actually drop from 8 hours to 6.5. And what happens is your body actually sleeps faster. You can train your body by the body learning that I only get 6.5 hours to sleep, so it sleeps quickly, and you are equally rested, equally refreshed, and you have those hours to do something with. Interesting story about a man in England who had an accident when he was young, and as a result of the accident, he fell on his head. He could only sleep 45 minutes at a time, and he only needed to sleep about 2 or 3 45-minute periods during the day. So he took all the rest of the time that he had. He slept very, very deeply for 45 minutes. He had an extra 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day. He took that time and he studied. By the time he was 35, he had 7 doctorates in 7 different subjects because he had spent all of those hours studying university subjects. Now, number 7, key to success or key to energy is natural vitamin and mineral supplements. Natural vitamin and mineral supplements. Most of our foods today, because they are mass-produced and because of the way we eat, we simply don't get all of the trace minerals and vitamins that we require. In fact, you'd be astonished to know that many people have a deficiency of a particular vitamin or mineral that they don't even know about, but which is causing them depressed energy levels. Sometimes a deficiency of zinc, sometimes a deficiency of selenium, sometimes a deficiency of B12, sometimes a deficiency of riboflavin or potassium in your diet can cause your system to be off-center, cause your system to function improperly, cause you to function at lower levels of energy. So you have to experiment, but the key is to get them from natural sources, pure natural sources. There are many vitamins that say that they are natural and organic, but they are not from natural sources. An example of a natural source vitamin is vitamin C from acerola cherries. Be very clear, because vitamin C from ascorbic acid and vitamin C from acerola cherries has an effectiveness level of maybe 20 to 1. The acerola cherries, 50 milligrams from acerola cherries, may be more effective than 1,000 milligrams from ascorbic acid crystals. So do your own research on vitamins and minerals, the critical part of your health and your fitness. And finally, remember this, if I can repeat. The key to success is desire. Do you really want to have high levels of energy? Do you want to live forever? Do you want to live to be 80 or 90 and still be energetic and vital? Number 2 is define what you want to do. How clearly do you want it? Write out a plan for yourself. Just simply writing out a plan in a series of affirmations. I sleep 6.5 hours per night. I am a non-smoker. I weigh your ideal weight. I exercise 3 times a week. And reading those affirmations over and over again, programming it into the subconscious, begins to trigger what is called autosuggestion, where you will actually feel impelled to engage in the health habits that will give you the energy and vitality that you desire. The third is decision. Make a decision to do it. Sometimes just getting up and getting going is critical. Fourth is determination. It's very, very hard to change. Remember we talked about the law of habit? It's very hard to change old habits. But if you can develop new positive habits that lead to high levels of energy and vitality, they will serve you all your life. And finally, here's the most difficult of all, the discipline. There's a beautiful old saying that says that discipline weighs ounces, but regret weighs tons. Discipline weighs ounces, but regret weighs tons. One final point. We said at the beginning of this seminar that your level of self-esteem, how good you feel about yourself, how much you like yourself, how much you love yourself, is the critical part of a healthy personality. And every single time you discipline yourself to do something that you know is right for you, that increases your levels of energy and vitality, your self-esteem goes up, you feel more positive, you have more energy, you get along better with other people, and you move more rapidly toward becoming the successful person that you're capable of becoming.
Session 22, Understanding the Mind-Body Relationship.
Let's talk now about the mind-body relationship and health, psychosomatic medicine, psycho the mind, soma the body. and how psycho the mind has an effect on bodily health. Back in 1920, a doctor wrote a controversial article where he suggested that as much as 20% of physical ailments were caused by mental disturbances or unhappiness, mental causes. 1930, in the 30s, doctors wrote again and said as much as 30% of our illnesses and ill health are mind or mentally related. In the 40s, someone wrote 40%. In the 50s, it was boosted to 50%. At every stage that it was boosted, it was vigorously resisted by the established medical professionals of the day. In the 60s, it went to 60%. In the 70s to 70%. Today, there are virtually no medical practitioners who disagree with the statistic that at least 80% of all the ailments that you and I suffer in the course of our lifetimes are psychologically caused. Psycho the mind makes soma the body sick. As a matter of fact, I've had many doctors, many medical professionals, psychologists, psychiatrists, and nurses in my courses who said that it's probably closer to 90, maybe even 95% of everything that we suffer, colds, flus, skin diseases, heart attacks, kidney disease, arthritis, strokes, up to and including cancer, are psychological in origin. So I want to talk today about stress and tension. I want to talk in this session about what it is in our mind that creates the situation in our bodies that makes us ill. Now we know, because we talked about this before, we talked about it many times, is that in a way we decide to get sick. Dr. Carl Simonton, who worked in Fort Worth, Texas for many years, wrote a wonderful book called Getting Well Again and did many, many excellent articles on the attitudinal aspects of disease. And he found it was an interesting thing that people seem to decide to get sick in order to deal with a situation in life that was unpleasant for them. And the more serious the situation in life was, the more serious the illness they got. For instance, if they were feeling underappreciated at work, they got a cold. If they felt that they were hard done by at work, they got the flu. If they felt that their marriage or their relationship or their entire career was a shambles and they didn't want to deal with that, they would get things as serious as heart conditions, strokes, and even cancer. He also found that people decide to get well as deciding to get sick. And that as soon as a person decided to get well, all the power of modern medicine and all the power of the body's immune system would come to work to make them better again. Now, why are stress and tension? Well, let's talk about stress and tension. When we talk about stress and tension, we know that stress and tension are manifestations of something being wrong with our view of the world. Stress and tension are the outward manifestations of our being unhappy with some aspect of our lives. Now, whenever we feel physical pain, if you touch a stove and it's hot and you feel physical pain, the reason we have the physical pain is to give us a warning that we are doing something that is harmful for us physically. The reason why we have stress and tension is to give us a signal that we are doing something in our lives that is harmful for us mentally. And unless we deal with the situation, eventually our mind will make the body sick, and the sickness is our way of avoiding dealing with the situation, right up to the point where we can actually make ourselves sick to death. Now, with regard to stress and tension, there is an entire new area of medicine today called psychoimmunology or psychoneuroimmunology, where they talk about the effect that the mind has on either weakening or strengthening your immune system. And they find that negative emotions, stress, tension, anxiety, anger, frustration of any kind actually depress the immune system. They depress antibody production, and they make you open, if you like, to all kinds of physical illnesses, including colds and flus and other things. Is that a person who is positive, optimistic, cheerful, enthusiastic, and has high self-esteem is usually a person who is resistant to virtually any of the normal diseases going around. But a person who is negative, depressed, pessimistic, down on themselves, cynical, if you like, low self-esteem, is a person whose antibody production is depressed and depressed and depressed. So sometimes they're sick all the time. And you find that negative people are often sick all the time. Now, the key point with regard to stress and tension is this, is that stress and tension come from within. They come from within, not from without. Is that there is no such thing as a stressful situation. There is only a stressful reaction. There's only a stressful reaction. For example, two people face a situation. We've used this example before, like a traffic jam. Two people face the same situation. One becomes upset, the other one is still relaxed. Or the same person faces the same situation 2 different days. One day they react differently and become upset. The next day they react in a positive way and don't become upset at all. It is always contained in the reaction. It is not out there, it is in here where stress and tension come from. It is the way that we think and respond to our world, not the world itself. Someone once wrote that there are 3 major sources of stress. And if we took the human body like this, the 3 major sources of stress are what might have been. Remember we said that people worry about the past? What might have been is a major source of stress. We continually think about how it might have been different. And in the present, we think of what we should do, what we shouldn't do. And we think in terms of shoulds and oughts. And in the future, we think of what might happen. And these 3, what might have been, what should, as opposed to what is, and what might happen, are major sources of stress in our lives. But it is always the way we think about the past, the way we think about the future, the way we think about our present in relation to reality that causes the stress, not the stress itself. We know that you can decide not to be sick. I've said this to many people in my courses, is that you can decide never to have colds again. Everybody decides to have colds or not to have colds. And when I say that, people get really, some people get very tense. Why? It's because, perfect example, why is it that young mothers never have colds? Why is it that mothers with small children never have colds, never get sick? It's because they don't have time. Is they make the mental decision that I don't have time. I have responsibilities in taking care of these children, which are so great that I cannot afford to get sick, and they don't get sick. They wait till the children grow up, go off to school, they have more time on their hands, they're spinning their wheels, or their kids grow up and go away, and then they go back to having colds and flus again. So you can decide not to be sick or not to have colds or flus by doing this very simple thing. Making the decision right now, you're never going to have a cold or flu again. Just make the decision right now, I am never going to have a cold again. And the next time you feel any cold symptoms in your body, just say, I feel terrific. I feel healthy. I feel happy. I feel terrific. I have health. I have no colds. And you know what happens? The cold will pack up and it'll go next door to Mrs. Brown, who believes in colds, and will leave you alone. And that is a fact. Well, let's talk. We talked earlier about the relationship between stress and tension and energy. Now, there are 3 major sources of energy, according to a great body of work that was done at the beginning of this century. The first major source of energy is food, and the type of food we eat, and the way we eat it, and the way we combine it, and nutrition, and vitamins, minerals, and so on. The second is air, the way we breathe, the depth that we breathe, the amount of oxygen that we get in, the amount of aerobic exercise that we get. The amount of air and the type of air is a major source of energy. And the third is impressions. Now, impressions are the way we take what happens to us in the world around us. Remember we talked about a stressful reaction? One situation can energize a person, the same situation can depress another. For instance, a disappointment or the falling through of a deal or something failing temporarily can cause one person to become depressed and fatigued, cause the other person to be energized and ready to go back on the offensive. So impressions, the way that we take in what is happening around us, are a major source on whether of our energy, whether it goes up or whether it goes down. And one of the most important pieces of work that I ever read on the subject is a discussion of how our body is an energy-generating machine, and it generates energy of different qualities, like an oil refinery. And the best example I can give you is this. Imagine that your body takes in raw food, just meat, potatoes, vegetables, and so on, and this is the basic foodstuff or energy that the body runs on. And if the body takes in 1,000 units of food, whatever that means, we could say 1,000 calories or 1,000 units of food, it can either be used at the physical level, as it is in most countries of the world, where it's all consumed in physical work, and at the end of the day the person is exhausted and has no energy left, or as civilization advances, as our civilization advances, if it is not consumed in hard physical work, then it is further refined and it moves up the energy chain, and it translates into emotional energy. And it takes 1,000 units of physical energy to generate 100 units of emotional energy. Now, emotional energy is what we feel with. Emotional energy is how we respond. Emotional energy is our energy, our vitality, our enthusiasm, our excitement, our self-esteem, our joy for life, and so on. If the energy is not used at the emotional level, then the body continues to refine it, like a refinery. Imagine that the physical level is crude oil. We'll call this crude. This is crude oil, takes in raw meat and potatoes. The crude oil in the oil refinery is refined down, and it comes to refined oil, the kind of oil that you would use in your car. If it is not consumed there, the refinery refines it even more into what is called mental energy. Mental energy is the energy that we think with. Now, this cannot be proved scientifically. It can only be proved intuitively by reference to your own experience. This would be the equivalent of gasoline, where refined oil is further refined, but it takes 1,000 units of crude oil to get 100 units of refined oil to get 10 units of gasoline. And if it's not burned up at the mental level, then it goes up and it becomes 1 unit of what is called psychic energy, or what is often called creative energy. And this is the equivalent of, let us say, lighter fluid, a very, very fine form of energy. Now, what happens? Well, we know that if we work physically very, very hard at a sport or work in the yard or do something else, at the end of the day, we're exhausted. Have you ever been so tired at the end of a day that you don't have time, you don't want to argue, you don't want to make a decision, you don't want to get in anything, you're just physically exhausted and all of your energy is burned out? Well, this is because we burned it all up at the physical level. However, in most of our professions or jobs today, we don't burn up all of our energy at the physical level, so it rises to the emotional level. When we have emotional energy, we look for an outlet, and our outlet is almost invariably our relationships. It can be other things, but almost invariably it's our relationships. We find an interesting thing is that positive emotions, if our emotions are positive, enthusiastic, joy, happiness, excitement, that we burn up very little of this energy, and the energy moves up into mental energy. If our mental world is positive, if we're working on positive projects, if we're working on projects that are really interesting and challenging to us, then we develop this energy, again, being positive, moves up higher, and we develop psychic energy. And psychic energy is the energy of creation, where we come up with ideas and we have inspirations and we're enthusiastic and we're motivated and so on. However, the biggest problem, and this is the key, is that most people burn up all their energy at this level, at the emotional level. They don't use it at the physical level because they don't work hard enough, but at the emotional level, they burn it all up, so they have little energy left at the mental level and almost no energy left at the psychic level. And as we said before, that you are a mind with a body to carry yourself around in. Everything that you are or ever will be as a result of how you use your mind. If all of your energy is burned up at the emotional level through negativity, fear, anxiety, stress, tension, anger, whatever else it happens to be, if it's all burned up at the emotional level, you do not have any of what are called the higher forms of energy with which to make a great life, with which to make a wonderful life, to engage in happy, joyous activities, to be creative, to find solutions, to set goals, to believe in yourself, and so on and so forth. The reason why less than 5% of the population fulfill their potential in any given generation is that most of them are completely preoccupied with what is called the expression of negative emotions. And this is the key. It is the expression of negative emotions that burns up all of our energy at lower levels, so we do not have the energy at the higher levels with which to fulfill our potential. We said earlier that a positive mental attitude is essential for success, that 85% of everything that happens to you is going to be attitudinal, that 85% of your success is going to be caught up in the quality of your interactions and your relations with other people. In other words, 85% of your success in life is going to be involved in positive emotions. However, if you burn up all of your emotional energy at this level in the expression of negative emotions, talking about negative things, talking to yourself about negative things, thinking about negative things, discussing negative things, criticizing, condemning, complaining, and so on, if you do that, then what happens is you have no energy to come up here, and here is where the great joy, the great happiness, the great success of life is involved. So what is the solution? The solution to high levels of energy, happiness, inner peace, loving relationships, living a long time, is to eliminate the expression of negative emotions. Eliminate the expression of negative emotions. This is one of the most important lessons I have ever learned in all of my years and tens of thousands of hours of study, is to eliminate the expression of negative emotions. That is the starting point of all personal growth. In fact, we said earlier, when we were talking about responsibility psychology, we said that the elimination of negative emotions is mandatory, not option. The elimination of the expression of negative emotions is the starting point of killing the negative emotions. If you do not express negative emotions, if you do not discuss negative emotions, if you do not get involved in negative conversations or negative self-talk, what happens is the negative emotions die. Because of the law of concentration, if you do not dwell upon a negative for any period of time, it loses its force and effect and dies on you. All the negative energy that would have been drained off by thinking about that negative emotion is available to you to do productive things. We know, and we'll talk about this later, but one outburst of anger, 5 minutes of uncontrolled anger, can burn up an entire day's worth of emotional energy in 5 minutes. That is why people who are angry all the time very seldom produce anything constructive. So we start by eliminating the expression of negative emotions. And how do we do that? We use some of the laws that we know about. The first and most important, of course, is the law of substitution. The law of substitution means that we find other things to say. Remember, the mind is not a vacuum. We concentrate, we use self-discipline to get our mind onto something that is positive. And by putting our mind on something that's positive, it's like shifting a light. By putting our mind on something that is positive, we cannot simultaneously think about our worry. We also know that if we get busy doing something that is constructive, the action itself, because it requires our mental and physical involvement, drives out the negative emotion. We're not saying to repress. So some people say, should you repress these emotions? Should you suppress them? I mean, if you feel like this, should you push them under the surface? No, not at all. We're saying this: find reasons not to express. Find reasons not to be negative in the first place. Find reasons not to express negative emotions. Now, what are some of the reasons? Some of the simplest reasons of all is, I am responsible. When you say, I am responsible, it's very, very hard for you to blame someone else. Remember, we said that almost all negative emotions arise from our tendency to blame someone or something else for something in our lives that we're not happy about. When you say, I am responsible, I am responsible, I am responsible, I am responsible. When we say that over and over again, our tendency to be negative goes down, our tendency to be positive goes up. The more that we use the law of substitution by saying, I am responsible, the more our negative emotions weaken, and eventually you can get to the point where negative emotions have only a minuscule or a minor influence in your life. It's almost as though we have anything from 0% negative emotions to 100% negative emotions. In fact, one of the characteristics of healthy personality is that a healthy personality is a person who is on this end of the scale. Now, every one of us is somewhere on this scale, moving in one direction or the other. The question you have to ask yourself is, what percentage of your conversation, talk to yourself, what percentage of your conversation with others, what percentage of your thoughts are negative and destructive and devaluing, what percentage of them are positive, constructive, and uplifting. And your objective is to remember that everything counts, is that it is not possible for you or I to grow as human beings. It is not possible for us to evolve with our negative emotions intact. That the only way that we can achieve our potential is by working on ourselves continually to curb the tendency toward the expression of negative emotions. This brings us to another mental law, which is very important. It's called the law of habit. Remember the law of habit. The law of habit says that if in the absence of some external influence, we will go on acting the same way indefinitely. The expression of negative emotions is a habit. The expression of negative emotions is the primary reason why people fail to fulfill their potential. The expression of negative emotions is the number one reason why people fail in life. Why? It's because the expression is the outward manifestation of the inner mental condition. As we express negative emotions, and sometimes we suppress them, or we repress them, or we hold them inside, as we suppress or repress negative emotions, or express them externally, they have exactly the same effect. Remember we talked about the law of expression? The law of expression says that whatever is impressed is expressed. That means that whatever we impress on the subconscious mind, through pictures, through words, through the things that we read, is expressed in our reality in that it manifests and becomes a part of our physical world. But we also talked about the law of reversibility. Remember, the law of reversibility says that just as the objective state creates the subjective state, in other words, the achieving of the goal gives us the feeling of being a winner, it also says the feeling of being a winner enables us to achieve the goal. The law of reversibility says that whatever is expressed is impressed. So that whatever you are saying to yourself or to other people, you are impressing on your subconscious mind, and it will simultaneously be expressed as a part of your reality. If you can understand this, I spent something like 1,000 hours studying this subject to get my mind around it. And I looked around me, and I've traveled all over the world. I looked around me and look at all these people that are unhappy and struggling and not successful, and I'm trying to figure out what it was. And it finally dawned on me in doing this reading that this was the answer, is that most people spend most of their time engaging in the expression of negative emotions, negative thoughts, negative ideas, negative opinions, negative criticism, devaluation, starting from early childhood, that leads to guilt, leads to feelings of worthlessness, leads to low self-esteem, fears of failure, fears of rejection, fears of loss, fears of lack, fears of limitation, fears of ill health, and so on. The expression of negative emotions is the key to understanding success and failure. So when we talk, as we have talked many times before, when we talk about how important it is to have a positive attitude, sometimes people will take this discussion that we're having and they'll say, well, that's just positive thinking. You're just doing positive thinking. I said, yes, but positive thinking equals mental health. Negative thinking equals mental illness. When we were talking about reprogramming your mind for success, we're talking about software for the brain, we talked about the importance of the reference group. The reference group are the people that you associate with. If you associate with people who habitually express negative emotions, it is the same as associating with people who have a communicable disease. And the communicable disease is underachievement and failure in life. 95% of everything that we say and do and think is determined by the external influences, by the power of suggestion around us. And you have a choice. You know that you have the capacity to do something great, to do something wonderful with your life. You know that you have the capacity to do far more than you've ever done before. You know that you have the capacity to earn more, to be happier, to achieve more, to get more peace of mind and satisfaction out of life than ever before. If you don't know that by this stage of this course, then I somehow have not explained it properly. However, the key is this, is you must look at your life in terms of positive versus negative. You must look at your life in terms of everything counting. You must look at your life in terms of all of the influences that you allow into your suggestive environment. You must look at your life in terms of the people. You must look at your life in terms of the television programs. Television programs, the average person watches 3 to 5 murders, rapes, or violent assaults every single night on television. The average adult has seen over 20,000 violent deaths on television by the time they've reached adulthood, watching television from early childhood. Does this have an effect on your life? Does it have an effect on your attitude? Does it have an effect on your success? The law of correspondence says that each person has within them a mental program or a mental equivalent. And everything in your external world will be exactly consistent, exactly in harmony with that mental equivalent. If you wish to change your external reality to something positive, something wonderful, something happy, something exciting, the starting point is to eliminate negative influences, eliminate the expression of negative emotions, get away from negative people, get away from negative books, negative magazines, negative television programs, and keep your mind focused singly on the things that you want to be, have, and do. This is the starting point of mental health, physical health, and all success and happiness in life.
Session 23, Eliminating Stress and Tension.
We said over and over again that the success personality is the generally optimistic, positive, happy, cheerful, if you like, outgoing personality. And we've also said from the very beginning that much of what you are today is learned. That most of your habits, your values, your attitudes, your expectations, your behaviors, your personality, qualities, and attributes have been learned by a process of input, repetition, selective perception, over and over again until you become the person that you are. We've also said that everything that you have today in your life, tangible and intangible, you have attracted to yourself because of the person you are. You can attract more because you can change the person that you are. In the last session, we talked about negative emotions being the major obstacle that stands between you and happiness, health, joy, and fulfillment in life. And in this session, I want to talk to you about the conditions that predispose you and me to being negative. We know that stress and tension and negative emotions are subject to the law of cause and effect. In other words, for every effect in our life, there's a specific cause. If you have tension, if you have stress, if you have negative emotions, just like if you have any physical ailment, there's a specific cause and we can trace it back. And in this session, I'm going to show you how to become your own psychotherapist. I'm going to give you 6 keys to self-awareness, self-understanding, self-development, so that whenever you feel unhappy or stressed or fearful or anxious or anything other than joyous and positive and happy, whenever you feel that way, you will be able to go through these 6 and do an evaluation of yourself and be your own psychotherapist. And in 95 to 99% of cases, you'll be able to identify exactly what it is that's troubling you and remove it. So let's go to the board. As I say, in my estimation, after years and years and thousands of hours, I think there's 6 primary conditions that cause us to feel stressed and tense and predispose us to negative emotions. Remember, negative emotions are merely the outward expression of an inward condition. If we can correct the inward condition, we can correct the outward expression. So number 1, starting point of negativity, in my estimation, top of the list, head of the hit parade, is a lack of meaning and purpose in life. A lack of meaning and purpose. In fact, in every study that I've looked at, we find that human beings, in order to be happy, need significance. They need to feel that their life has meaning. They need to feel that there's a reason for being alive. They need to feel that they're going in a particular direction. So a lack of meaning and purpose leads to a lack of direction. And I said earlier that one of the most profound observations of the human condition is that we are all goal-seeking organisms, that we are only happy when we're moving progressively toward the direction of something that's important. Earl Nightingale said that happiness is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal or goal. So as soon as we don't have a worthy ideal or goal, we start to drift, we start to go in circles, and we start to become unhappy. So lack of meaning and purpose means a lack of goals. We've talked throughout this session how important it is that you have goals, how important it is that you write them down, how important it is that you think about them, how important it is that you work on them every day, because it is goals that give meaning, purpose, direction, power, enthusiasm, and drive to your life. Now, if you want a very simple test, all you have to do is look at the times of your life when you felt the very best, now or some other time, and you'll find invariably you were working progressively towards something that was important for you. You also can test this by looking at people around you who are not happy. And a good friend of mine has a very simple test. Whenever somebody comes to him and they're unhappy for any reason at all, he says to them, he says, what are your goals in life? Where do you want to be in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years? And you know what he finds? He finds in 80-90% of cases, people who are unhappy have no goals. And the flip side is also true. In 80-90% of cases, people who are happy are people with clear, specific goals. So we've talked a lot about this, setting goals, writing them down, making plans for their accomplishment, and working progressively toward the accomplishment of even a small goal will straighten you out, will lift you up, will make you positive and enthusiastic faster than anything else that you can do. In fact, what Viktor Frankl found in his work in logotherapy is that if you have a meaning, if you have a reason, you will live sometimes 10, 20, 30 years longer than people who don't. The average life expectancy, by the way, of people in America who retire without goals is 14 months. Interesting, 14 months. And people who retire with goals can live 25 or 30 years. Number two, second reason or condition that predisposes us to tension and stress is what is called the incomplete action. The incomplete action is when we engage in an action or a behavior that is not finished. It's just partially finished. When we start a job and don't finish it. When we start a task, or we start to write out our goals and we leave it. There is within the human psyche what is called an urge to completion. This urge to completion makes us very uncomfortable when we have work left undone. In fact, this incomplete action really works well in our behalf, especially if we have set priorities and what we're working on is important and contributes something. Big problem occurs, by the way, is if we don't set priorities, if we don't have our goals clearly organized and we don't set priorities, we can be doing things that are not important to us, but we can still feel stressed out because we're leaving them hanging. We can still feel stressed out because we are procrastinating. And as you know, procrastination is not only a thief of time and life, procrastination is a major source of stress. We put off a task and we put off a task and we become more and more stressed because this urge to completion drives us, and yet this urge to procrastinate holds us back. Every single completed act is a source of self-esteem and motivation. Every single time you complete an action of any kind, whether it's washing the dishes and cleaning up the sink, mowing the lawn, putting together a major proposal, getting a degree, getting married, or starting and building a successful business, every single time you complete an action, your self-esteem goes up because you feel like a winner. You feel like a winner every single time you do something that has a beginning and an end. It's called the feeling of earned success, the feeling of achievement. It makes us feel terrific. Now, every single time you engage in an act that you don't finish, it's like running in a race where you don't finish, and you feel like a loser. So the rule is this: do it now, do it now, do it now. Get on with it, get working, get busy, complete these actions. This brings us to a special case of the incomplete action, which psychologists call unfinished business. Unfinished business is a major source of stress for you and for I. And it happens all the time. Unfinished business occurs when you get into a relationship with another person or persons, and the relationship ends, sometimes unpleasantly, but it's still dragging on. Now, the two most common examples of unfinished business are romantic relationships that end, but they're not over yet, and business relationships where you lose a job, or you're fired from a job, or you quit a job, but you have not let go of it. With regard to the first, romantic relationships, there are three keys to dealing with the end of a romantic relationship when it's over. Number one is to remember this, is that nobody can ever have any effect on your emotions unless there is still something that you want from them. In other words, if you don't want anything from someone else, if you don't want their love, their respect, their money, or something else, they can't have any control over you. As soon as you don't want anything from someone else, the emotional component is torn and you're free of them. The way that you deal with a finished marriage or a finished relationship is very simple. I'll just throw this in quickly. 3 steps. Number one, it's called writing the letter. And thousands of people have taken this advice, and now they teach this in courses all over the country. You write a letter to that person. In the letter you write 3 things. Number one is you write, I accept 100% responsibility for our relationship and for everything that happened in it. You are responsible. As an adult, you take responsibility. You got into the relationship, you stayed in the relationship or the job or whatever else it happened to be, but let's limit this to a relationship now. Number two is you forgive the other person 100% for everything they ever did that hurt you. I forgive you for everything you ever did or said that hurt me. And number three, you wish them well. Wish him or her well. And then mail the letter. Mail the letter with the right address and the right postage, and the instant that you mail the letter, your life will change. If you know anybody who's going through a difficult relationship or the breakdown of a relationship, put them through this simple exercise, have them mail the letter, and the instant the letter drops in the postbox, your life will change. It'd be like an enormous burden is lifted off your shoulders. I had a very good friend, a woman who was fired from a job with a large financial institution, and she was going to sue that company, and she was going to sue them for 18 months as severance, and she was going to get them, and so on and so forth. And I asked her, I said, she was really angry, I said, what are your chances of winning? She said, well, maybe 50, 60%. I said, how long will it take? She said, at least 18 months, maybe 2 years. I said, what kind of a mental state are you going to be in for that period of time? I said, can you get another job? She said, no, I couldn't get another job because that would weaken my case in court. I said, why don't you just let it go and walk away from it and get on with something else? Because it's just not worth it. And you know, she took my advice, and within 3 months she had a better job at a better salary with a better position. She wrote me a card. She said it was the best advice she ever had. So if you're in a situation of unfinished business, or you find yourself in one, the solution is finish it, get rid of it, have done with it. Okay? Number 3 reason what causes, or the third condition that causes you and I an enormous amount of stress is fear of failure. Our old friend, fear of failure. Fear of failure, which as we know is a conditioned response, goes back to childhood, goes back to our parents saying, no, don't, stop, get away from there, punishing us for trying new things and different things. It reemerges in adult life as this fear of trying, this fear of attempting something new, this deep down feeling that settles in the pit of the stomach whenever we contemplate a major change. Fear of failure can be dealt with in 2 simple ways. Number 1 is the beautiful quote from Mark Twain. It says, do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain. Do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain. This is what is called systematic desensitization. If you're afraid of cold calling, just get out and do it until you don't think about it anymore. If you are afraid of speaking publicly in front of an audience, or selling, or doing anything, just get out and do the thing you fear over and over again until finally you reach the point where it doesn't disturb you at all. Thousands, even millions of men and women who've been terrified of public speaking have been able to force themselves to get up in front of small groups and then larger and larger groups, and eventually reach the point where they're unafraid to do the thing they fear, and what paralyzed them at one time doesn't bother them at all anymore. So do the thing you fear. Confront the fear. Face the fear. Deal with the fear. Remember that the fear is only a negative mental habit pattern that you can eliminate by facing it and doing it over and over again until it's gone. Now, the second thing that you can do, very, very simple affirmation that you can use to eliminate the fear of failure is this. Is repeat whenever you think of the fear situation, whenever you feel the physical manifestation, the anxiety, the stress, the quickening heart rate, whenever you think of the fearful situation, say over and over to yourself very strongly, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. And whenever you see someone else who is going through fear and uneasiness, someone in your family, one of your friends, tell them that too. Say that you can do it, you can do it. You can do it. Every single one of us has been encouraged to do something that has been momentous in our lives because someone else believed that we could. So say, I can do it, and then encourage everybody you know who has a goal. And say to them, you can do it. I can do it, you can do it. But whenever you feel this tension, you'll find a remarkable thing. If you say, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. Or I think I can, I know I can. When you repeat this, you will find that this message, emotionalized, coming from the conscious mind to the subconscious, hits the other message of I can't, coming up, and it drives it down. And the more emotion you put into I can do it, the weaker and weaker becomes the I can't. And eventually, the stronger emotion, remember, law of emotion, the stronger emotion will dominate and overpower the weaker emotion. This brings us to the 4th major cause of stress and tension in our lives. And it's number 4, considered to be perhaps one of the most important or the worst of all fears, the fear of rejection. The fear of rejection starts in early childhood. As you know, an infant comes into the world with no fears at all. And the infant comes in needing an enormous amount of love, touching, approval, and unconditional acceptance from his or her parents. However, parents, in order to direct and control their children, use destructive criticism and conditional love in order to get them to do what they want them to do. Now, a child who grows up with conditional love, as we talked about earlier, a child who grows up with conditional love, that means the parents say, you better or else. If you don't, you're going to get it. Or if the child makes a mistake and drops something, or comes home late, or breaks something, or gets a bad grade, the parents stop loving the child. Now, in their hearts, the parents may not stop loving the child. But the child perceives that the parents have stopped loving him or her because the parents turn cold. The parents punish the child. The parents send them to their bedroom. Whenever I have to discipline one of my children, and the way we discipline our children now is we put them in the corner. Kids hate to stand in the corner. I have kids that are 7 and 5, and Michael is 1, or David is 1. He's too small to stand in the corner. But what I do is I tell them this. I say, I love you very much, but you have to stand in the corner for 10 minutes. Or I love you very much, but you're going to have to go to your bedroom without dessert. But I always tell them that I love them. My love is unconditional, but what they did or their behavior is not acceptable, and then I stand them in the corner. So even when they stand in the corner, they know that I love them. And they'll even say that. They'll say, I know you still love me. Standing in the corner, they'll say that, but I have to stand in the corner anyway. So conditional love leads to fear of rejection. Fear of rejection leads to, as adults, it leads to type A behavior. Now it's interesting, men and women manifest this fear of rejection in different ways. For men, predominantly, we manifest it in type A behavior. Women have a tendency to manifest this fear of rejection, this growing up with conditional love, in 4 forms. One is depression, another is withdrawal, a third is psychosomatic symptoms, headaches and tension, and a fourth is hypersensitivity. Hypersensitivity in that they are very, very concerned about the opinions of other people. They think and they adjust their behaviors and actions always in consideration of what others might think, what others might say. Now, men are similar to that, but men have a tendency to take out this conditional love, this fear of rejection, this lack of being loved in childhood, in type A behavior, which is an aggressive response to life that is extremely unhealthy. And about 60% of men are type A's, and about 10% of women. As more and more women enter into highly competitive occupations, more and more women are becoming type A's too. But right now, it is a major killer. In fact, Dr. Kenneth Cooper says that there is no death from heart disease prior to age 70 in the absence of type A behavior. That most of the work that's being done on heart disease today, unfortunately, where they look at cholesterol and they look at lifestyle and so on, the fact is that without the stress, the tension, and the drive of type A behavior. Type A behavior was an expression that was developed by 2 heart specialists who found that most of their patients had a particular psychological profile. They had a way of acting, walking, and talking that was consistent over every single patient who had heart disease. And we'll talk about the opposite, type B, in just a second. So type A behavior is a killer. As a matter of fact, most people who are true type A's, that's about 20% of the male population, true type A's usually die by the age of about 55. In America and Canada today, about 80% of the money in our countries is controlled by women whose husbands burned themselves out and died young earning it. A recent study by Forbes magazine, Dr. Shirley Blotnick of Forbes, suggested that most of these women spend all the money that their husbands earned before they die themselves and pass very little on to their families. Now, it's just very, very interesting that men work all their lives, burn themselves out, kill themselves with early heart attacks. The women spend the money, and at the end of the woman's life, there's nothing left. Something to think about when you think about how important it is to amass fortune. Okay, so some of the characteristics of type A behavior. First characteristic of type A behavior is what it's called the hurry sickness. The person who has type A behavior is always in a hurry. They're always going fast. They can't stop. They're very, very impatient. They've got to get things done. They can't slow down. They don't feel like relaxing. They have this hurry sickness, and they're continually on the go, on the go, on the go. Number 2 is they have what is called insecurity of status. Insecurity of status, because of, again, going back to childhood, insecurity of status means that no matter how much they accomplish, they never relax. No matter how many promotions they get or how much money they make, they never think that they're good enough. They never have this feeling of unconditional love, so they're continually striving for it. By the way, where does unconditional love come from? Almost invariably from the father. The father is the predominant figure, and most of us, for one reason or another, had fathers that didn't give us the quality and quantity of unconditional love we desired. And very often we find ourselves striving in life, even after our parents have died, we're striving somehow to earn their approval by succeeding, or succeeding more, or succeeding more. It's also another example of type A behavior is continually striving for performance. We're very performance oriented, but it's performance to some undetermined high standard. And this is the key, to some undetermined high standard. What does that mean? It means that no matter how well we do, we're never satisfied because the standard is undetermined. We've not said that if we achieve a certain standard, we'll be satisfied. What we do is we continue to try to perform, and every single time we achieve any kind of a goal, we raise the bar. And then we raise the bar higher. We keep raising the bar, and we keep raising the bar, and we keep running. It's like having your quota expanded or increased every single time you hit a goal, so the quota keeps growing and growing and growing. A fourth characteristic of type A behavior is competitiveness. Competitiveness which is generalized toward almost everybody. Interestingly, let me go over here while they clean the board. With regard to competitiveness, you'll find that there is what is known as lack of discrimination in competitiveness. A person who is a type A behavior, who is a type A, competes against everybody for everything. They don't have the ability to set priorities, to say, now, this is a key area for me to excel in, but this is not particularly important. They compete for parking spaces. They compete for on the freeways. They compete for a place in the elevator. They compete for a place in the restaurant. They compete to work with a large customer. They compete to work on a small job. They have the inability to discriminate between what is an important area to do well in relative to others and what is an unimportant area to do well in relative to others. So be alert to this competitiveness where we're always comparing ourselves favorably or unfavorably with other people. In Desiderata, it said, neither compare thyself with others, for you will always find others who are better than you, and that you will feel inferior, and others who are worse than you, and you'll feel superior. The type A is always comparing themselves with other people, and especially he or she compares himself with people on their own level. They have a tendency, unfortunately, to step on the people below them. They have a tendency, unfortunately, to be preoccupied with their bosses and the opinion of their bosses, because the type A's boss takes on the role of the parent. As they go from childhood to adulthood, as they go from the family to the workplace, they go from trying to earn the approval of the parent to trying to earn the approval of the boss. And they become preoccupied with the boss's opinion. So number 5 is aggression. The type A is aggressive. And in conjunction with that, hostility. The type A is angry. The type A is angry because it goes back again to infancy, to childhood, where the type A just never got the love that he or she required and was angry as a child and is now angry as an adult. A sixth characteristic of type A is that the type A is thing-oriented versus people-oriented. Is thing-oriented, especially in terms of numbers. The type A is concerned with money, cars, home, status, publications, sales, production figures, earnings, and so on. Not particularly person-oriented. As a matter of fact, as far as the type A is concerned, there are 3 types of people. There are people who can help him or her, and those are the people which he is very, very careful with. There are people who cannot help him or her. Those people he will step on, be rude to, be snobbish with. And then there are the people who are neutral, and those people he just ignores. Now, interesting, there's one other category. There's people who can be threats or who are competitive threats to him. Those are people that he or she will use Machiavellian diabolical tactics to try to undermine and to hurt. This goes back into all the work in management that we see, Machiavellian management. And number 7, the type A takes no time off. See, the type A feels that he or she is on a treadmill, and that if he or she slows down, especially someone's going to catch him. So even on the weekends they work. Even on holidays they work. Even when they travel on an airplane, they're always working. They never stop working because they're afraid somebody might be gaining on them. Well, what happens to type A's? According to our research, we find that 2 things. Is that type A's tend to die young. We said that before. They tend to be unhappy. They tend to feel that they are in a rat race. They tend to feel that they are being driven by external circumstances. And this is the type A's career path. This is time, and this is money. This is the amount of money, position, power, prestige they earn. This is the amount of time. The type A's career path tends to be like this. They rise very rapidly at the beginning of their careers, and they are used. And there are some companies that test for and hire only type A's. But at a certain point, they start to burn out. They start to flatten out. And they flatten out for a reason. It's because the people up above who know what's going on don't want them any higher in the company. And the people down below, whom they stepped on, will not help them or support them. Now, the type B is different. The type B's career path is more like this. This is the B, this is the A. The type B's career path has a slower rise, but it's steady and continuous. And here's the key. The type B focuses on performance. And performance is the key to success in the world of work. The type A focuses on politics. And politics only works until the political structure changes, and it always does. Well, if you recognize yourself as a type A, how do you stop being a type A and start move toward being a type B, a more relaxed, high performance, more creative, more people-oriented person? Well, it's very simple. Step number one is admit that you're a type A. Admit it. Most people won't admit that they're type A's. Well, once you admit that you're a type A, number two, and some people say, I'm a type A, I'll be dead before I'm 55. Once you admit it, decide to change. Make the decision to change. And once you've made the decision to change, play the taped affirmation that we provide for you. Taped affirmation twice daily. If you play the taped affirmation twice per day, you will stop being a type A behavior, or a type A person. You'll go from being a type A to being a type B. Now, one final point. If somebody says, what's the difference between type A and workaholic? So-and-so is a workaholic, so-and-so is a type A. Very, very simple. The workaholic is very different from type A. It's almost like there's a competition here. And how do you tell? On the outside, they seem to work with the same amount of intensity. But the difference is simply this. The workaholic is inner directed, is directed toward goals, and is self-determined. The type A is externally driven and feels that their agenda is set by people outside themselves. The workaholic can take time off. This is the test. The workaholic can take time off. The type A cannot take time off. If you ask a workaholic, what's the most important thing in your life? The workaholic will almost invariably say, my family, my personal relationships. If you ask the type A, they'll say, my work, my career, my business. That's how you tell the difference between the two. And again, the key behavior, and you can only judge by behaviors, is the ability to take time off and spend time on family, health, friendships, travel, and so on. Okay, this brings us to the fifth major condition that predisposes us to stress, tension, negative emotions, psychosomatic illness, and early death. And it's number 5, and it's denial. Denial means denial of reality. It's interesting, Peter Uspensky talked about this in one of his books many years ago. He said that the human organism is a lying organism, and in that we have a tendency to delude ourselves or to lie to ourselves, and one of the ways that we do it is through denial of reality. We refuse to face reality. We pretend that life is not the way it is. Especially, we refuse to face unpleasant truths. And this is worth writing. The refusal to face unpleasant truths. Now, some of the most unpleasant truths of our lives have to do with our talents and abilities, our personalities, our relationships, and our work. Is that a person who's doing poorly in their work and who doesn't like their work will often deny it and pretend that it's not true. And the key to overcoming denial, and by the way, most psychologists believe that denial of reality is the number one cause of mental illness. Of course, it's tied into all of the others that we've talked about so far. The key to dealing with denial is very simply this, is to understand where it comes from. We engage in denial because we are afraid of embarrassment. All cases of denial involve embarrassment, anticipated embarrassment of some kind. They involve what the Asians call loss of face. All occasions of denial require that we face the truth in our lives. So here are the keys to using and to understanding denial. Number 1, remember this. Key to the philosophy of objectivism. Reality is. Reality is. What that means is that whatever the situation in your life is, it is. It's a fact. It's a truth. And the facing of it, and the sooner you face it, the better off you'll be and the happier you'll be. Number 2 is that there is always a price you can pay to be free from any stress or tension. There is always a price you can pay. There is always a price. If you're unhappy for any reason, there's always a price you can pay. And so you have to ask yourself, what is the price? And number 3 is resolve to pay the price. Resolve to pay the price. Sooner rather than later. Because no matter what, you're going to have to pay it eventually, rather than later. Now here are the 2 questions that you can use to unlock the key to denial. Unlock the door of denial. And this is it. Whenever you feel tense or unhappy or stressed, or you start to get colds or flus or sniffles, or you start to feel unhappy, or you don't sleep well at night, or you start to find yourself irritable or distracted or unhappy for any reason at all, assume that there's something in your life that you're not dealing with. Assume that denial is taking place, that there's something that is making you uncomfortable and you are putting off dealing with it. It is the resistance, it's the not dealing with it that causes the stress. So this is what you do. You simply say, what is it in my life that I'm not facing? What is it in your life that you're not facing right now that's causing some stress or some disharmony? What is it in my life that I'm not facing? And then don't delude yourself by saying, well, maybe it's because my car's parked in the parking meter when there's no money in it, or maybe it's because I didn't have lunch. Don't delude yourself. Immediately ask yourself, what's the worst it could possibly be? What is the worst it could possibly be? If you're married, often the worst it could possibly be is that something is wrong with your marriage. If you have children, sometimes the worst it could possibly be is that you're concerned that your children are turning out wrong. If you're in a job, the worst it could possibly be may be that this is the wrong job for you, but you're afraid to leave it. Maybe for men, this is a terrible thing, but the worst it could possibly be is that you're not very good at your chosen career. A man who feels that he's not very good at his work has a terrible amount of stress going on inside. Maybe you've taken a degree. I had a good friend who took a medical degree, 8 years, qualified as a doctor, found he hated medicine, didn't want to go through for medicine. His father had paid his way. His father was a doctor. He planned to be a doctor all his life. He's now 26 years old, and he didn't like the practice of medicine. He went through tremendous stress before he accepted that. So the key is, say, what is it in my life that I'm not facing, and then resolve to face it. Now, in psychology, there's 2 basic personalities. There's what is called the evader personality. The evader personality is the personality that doesn't like to face reality, that's always hoping that reality will go away, or something will turn up, or something will change. And there is the confronter. Now, we're taught as children not to be confronters, but the fact is that the confronter personality is far healthier than the evader. In a test that they did at one of the leading universities, they took 2 groups of students and they identified them as evaders and confronters and put them into an experiment where they were tied up, attached to an electrode by their fingers, and every 60 seconds they got a shock, a mild shock on the finger. And they watched them through a one-way mirror, and they found that the evaders would sit there while the clock was going tick, 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 but they would never look at the clock. They would talk, they would make jokes, they would distract themselves, but they'd never look at the clock. And at the end of the experiment, their blood pressure, measured from beginning to end, was up over 30%. Very high stress. The confronters, on the other hand, were very different. The confronters would do the same thing. They talk to each other, they keep their fingers in the electrode, but as the clock came up to 12 and the shock came, they would all be watching the clock, and they would watch the clock and take the shock and then go on back with their conversation, keeping their eye on the clock all the time. At the end of this experiment, their blood pressure was the same. The key to mental health is to be a confronter, not an evader. Ask, what is the worst it could possibly be? What is it in my life that I'm not facing? And then whatever it is, resolve to face it, resolve to pay the price. Never trade your peace of mind for anything. The most important rule that you can learn in life is set peace of mind as your highest goal. And if something is robbing you of your peace of mind, then the highest responsibility you have to yourself is to confront and deal with the situation and make it into it. The 6th major cause or condition that causes us stress, tension, and negative emotion is anger. We've talked about anger, and we know that anger depends for its very genesis on the phenomena of blaming. Now, why do we become angry? Well, we become angry when we perceive, and this is the key, when we have a perception of being aggressed upon, when we have a perception that our expectations are being frustrated, when we have a perception of fear or pain, when we have a perception or when we interpret our world, when we look at our world and we say that there is something out there that is making us a victim. You see, in order for us to get angry, we must perceive ourselves as a victim. Whenever we perceive ourselves as a victim, there's a powerful urge inside of us to attack or to counterattack. In health, we call this the fight or flight response. Whenever we are threatened, just like an animal, this primordial response of fight or flight is triggered and we want to do something. However, in our society, it's usually not possible. Retaliation is usually not possible. Retaliation is not possible because it's not acceptable. The person that we want to retaliate is bigger than us or is gone. Or it's not advisable because the person who causes us the problem is our boss, our mother-in-law, or something else. So if we do not get this anger out of our system, if we don't get it out, it builds up inside the system and it poisons the system. So Dr. Hans Selye came up with what he called gross physical impact activity. He found that any kind of contact dispelled anger. So he found that if you could engage in any kind of activity that involved contact, you could get the anger out of your system. He found with your hands you could hit things. He found with your feet you could kick things. He found that the third method of contact was voice. You could scream. And screaming is a way of getting anger out of our system. And finally, he found that with your teeth, you could bite. And when you think of a particularly violent fight, you think of a fight where people hit, kick, scream, and bite, where people's anger is expressed in hitting, kicking, screaming, and biting. Of course, the key to dealing with everything that we've talked about, all six, but especially anger, is what we call the cognitive control method. And as we come to the end of this session, here are the keys to managing health and stress. Remember that stress is positive, that stress that is goal-directed gives energy, gives vitality, makes us feel terrific. But stress that is directed, that is externally oriented, that is a result of being pressured and driven to do something, is negative. It robs us of energy and it makes us sick. It's the difference between an internal locus of control, goal-oriented, and an external locus of control, external pressures. Cognitive control means I am responsible. It means that nobody can make you feel anything without your permission. That as long as you accept complete responsibility and you use your mind to stay on top of your life, that you can control the way that you think and feel. Also, the law of substitution. The law of substitution says that you cannot think and feel stressed if you keep your mind on something positive. Now, what do you keep your mind on to stay positive? This is the key. Think about your goals all the time. Think about your goals all the time. You see, your goals, once you've written them out, once you've decided what it is you want and made a plan to accomplish them, when you think about your goals all the time, it becomes a habit. When we talk about habit, when we look at anger, anger is also a habit. Do you know that when you give in to anger, it is a mark of weakness, a mark of childishness, a mark of immaturity, a mark of insincerity, but it is also a conditioned response, that every single time that you allow yourself to become angry, you lower your resistance to anger. Every single time that you stop yourself from becoming angry by accepting responsibility, refusing to blame, taking control of your emotional life, you increase your resistance to anger until it gets to the point where sticks and stones can break your bones, but words will never hurt you. In summary, the keys to maintaining a high quality of inner peace in life. Number one condition that robs us of inner peace is the lack of goals. Set clear, specific goals and work on them every day. Think about them all the time. Number two is incomplete action. Finish your tasks. Carry them through to completion. Overcome procrastination. Number three is the fear of failure. Confront your fears. Do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain. Number four is the fear of rejection. The way to overcome the fear of rejection is by moving toward becoming a type B personality. Play the tape. Place greater emphasis on your relationships. Be more relaxed. Live a more balanced life. And realize that this type A behavior, this obsessive compulsive behavior, comes from childhood experiences that are past now. Number four is overcome denial by being willing to face reality and accept that whatever it is, it is. Remember, there's always a price you can pay to be free of something that disturbs you, and you always know what the price is. Ask yourself, what is it that I'm not facing, and then resolve to face it. And finally, anger. Anger comes from trying to blame someone else, trying to find someone or something external to ourselves that is responsible for our own unhappiness. The key to dealing with anger is to accept total responsibility, find ways not to express negative emotions, think continually about your goals, and get so busy working on something that's important to you that you don't have time for any negativity at all. And finally, remember this, is that stress is positive as long as it is goal-oriented. And if you develop lots and lots of goal-oriented stress, you will accomplish great things, have lots of health and energy, have low levels of physical ailments, and probably live to be 100.